You never know what you're going to get at a Unitarian Universalist service. A little Appalachian, some dancing, some tap, and all of you. How you all doing out there? Yeah, it's been a rough week. Been a rough couple of weeks. Yeah, it's tough right now. And it's kind of crazy making. I think that's sort of the point. So we're going to try to make it a little less crazy making, a little more sane here. That's why we come together every week, to remind ourselves of the bigger values about why we're here and what we're doing. Because we're here actually now, it seems, to stand in resistance to some of these things that we're seeing on the public stage unfolding before us. We have become part of that resistance, my friends. And we need to find joy on a Sunday morning so that we can remember what it is we're resisting for. Can you hear me? Yeah. I remember the very first time I really understood the concept of inclusion. I was leading a staff meeting in one of my previous congregations. There were 6 of us in the meeting, 4 men and 2 women, and one of those women was Asian American. She was also our newest hire, whose job it was to lead us, ironically it would turn out, to become more diverse and socially active in our justice work. We were discussing a strategy on how we'd reach out to immigrant rights groups in the area, and our diversity specialist started to speak up. But what did I do? I ignored her. I kept talking, because I like to talk. And so happens when men speak over women, she stopped talking. And guys, just in case you haven't ever done it, you should test the time that men talk more than women. It's actually 2 to 3 times as much. As so happens, when I didn't even notice that, she just stopped talking. And when I asked her later in the meeting what I thought we should do, she said, "Well, seems like you have this all figured out." And being rather dense at times, I was perplexed. And after the meeting, she asked if she could speak with me privately, and when I closed the door to my office, I could see she was angry. And I've never been comfortable with anger, but I sensed the need to listen. 5 daughters and their mother will teach you that. She told me that I was wrong, of course, to cut her off, but at least 3 ways, 3 fronts. First, because as a man, I just assumed I could keep talking when she started to speak. That was quite obvious. Second, as a woman of color, the slight was emphasized by what it said to the other people, all white, in the room. Her voice was secondary. That's what my action told her. And third, her experience, indeed the very reason we hired her, was to work on the issue we were discussing. I started to speak again. For sure, she shut me down and said, "I'm not finished." And she went on to explain that men speaking over women is a symptom of patriarchy, which is very much alive in our culture. And that my dismissing her for her thoughts was a symptom of white supremacy culture, what some of us call systemic racism, but white supremacy culture is the more accurate phrase because it talks about how the white is the norm, supreme, always. I started to say this was not my intention, but she interrupted me again. "I don't care what your intention is," she said. "It's the impact that matters." I would like to say that that interchange corrected my behavior, but it didn't. But it did begin a long process of education, which I'm very much still in. Cisgendered white man of a certain age and authority that I am. As I would learn later in coming years, it was because of my authority, and I would actually say the authority of almost everyone in this room, that we need to put that authority to the work of inclusion now, especially now. We have heard a lot about the attempt by the present administration to dismantle DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in the federal government. First, I want to assure you that just shutting down an office won't actually stop the work. There are many supervisors in the federal government who know what their responsibility is, although this will definitely hurt us as a country. I've heard the radical right say that DEI stands for didn't earn it. Yeah, That hurts, doesn't it? That's a perversion, my friends. That's a perversion of a moral mandate towards inclusion. And guess what? Most of us didn't earn it either. So when someone of achievement tells me he earned it, which I hear, so others, meaning those who are not white and born to privilege, should go earn it themselves, like I did. I worked hard. I usually say, really? You earned that all by yourself? I don't think so. Because you have had tremendous privilege handed to you by virtue of who you are, to whom you were born, and the culture into which you were born. I remember sitting down at a Rotary Club luncheon in Westport, Connecticut, my previous congregation. Like here, it's one of the wealthiest towns in America, certainly in Connecticut, on the Gold Coast, as they say, where the median price of a house is $3.3 million. And that value increases 5% year over year. You can begin to see the math here. A young man sat down next to me, well-dressed, and he looks at me and says, "So what part of the lottery did you win to be here?" I asked him what he meant, and he said, "Well, either you were born into this wealth, or you climbed up some golden ladder that someone gave you to get here. But either way, you and I won the lottery of life." There's a reason, my friends, that women, and especially women of color, insist on being recognized for their achievements professionally, such as Dr. Jill Biden. It's not vanity, and it's not defensiveness. It's the authority of inclusion. And there's a reason why I, the Reverend Dr. John T. Morehouse, often just refers myself to you as John. I'm not being humble as much as I am trying to decenter my authority to make room for others. There's a reason I try to go last in a meeting to speak, because I want to hear what's being said, but most likely I want to decenter my authority as a white male of a certain age. The tragedy of dismantling DEI in the federal workplace is that it recenters whiteness. By dismantling the DEI in the federal workplace, we are recentering whiteness in our culture as if it needs to be centered enough. I've heard the claim that dismantling diversity and inclusion restores us to a meritocracy. Rubbish. What meritocracy? Yes, your merits will propel you forward, but only if you're on a level playing field. And guess what? We're not on a level playing field. And there's a difference between equality and equity. Equity restores us to some of the level playing field, but not nearly enough. It just begins. So for us, friends, the authority of inclusion means we have to go beyond equality to embrace equity, to the corrections of the field that make human relations moral and right and true and good. And so our task, our moral task as a religious people, now more than ever, is to use our authority, and you have it in this room, to promote inclusion again. And for a country such as ours, this actually makes powerful sense, economic sense. Ruchia Toshan, in her book, Inclusion on Purpose, noted that the RAND Corporation estimated that intentionally including diversity in the workplace would increase our GDP by $3 trillion a year. That's trillion with a T. The fact of the matter is that only through the authority of the ruling white class, mostly male people of privilege, can we unlock that powerful voice in the world. That's part of the work that we have to do. And here's the kicker, friends. Inclusion is not the responsibility of BIPOC folks, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. It's not their responsibility to teach us. And even having the Asian American woman there to teach all us white people in that last congregation what we needed to do to become more diverse was itself tokenism at its best. It's our responsibility to teach one another about what this means. And it's going to be hard work, but it's going to be good work. You're going to feel better about it. Now, the Unitarian Universalist Association, the mothership, I suppose, has been on the forefront of efforts such as these to make inclusion central to our spiritual identity. If you go on the uua.org website, you will see what they dream of us to become. When we say that everyone is welcome here, we need to make sure we mean everyone. And that includes all kinds of inclusion. Not just race or ethnicity, but inclusion in terms of ability, inclusion in terms of class, inclusion in terms of even language itself. It's taken me years to stop saying these long words that are so intellectually satisfying, such as the hermeneutics of suspicion. And we've had to learn, I've had to learn, that by using story, we are able to more adequately express the values that we embrace as Unitarian Universalists. These values of inclusion and love and compassion, and the need to be justice-oriented people. You can't learn to become more inclusive with a weekend workshop. That's something that we've tried to do, maybe not here, but I've tried to do it in other congregations, and I'm going to tell you that's pathetic, to be quite honest. Not only is it tokenism at best, but it actually didn't do anything. It actually made it worse. I believe that to become inclusive, we have to do this over a long period of time. That's why you're going to see, and now that I got a little extension to my contract, you're going to see us do more work around this. And we're going to do something that I don't think you've ever really done before. And that's we're going to work on a covenant. Because we are a covenantal people by faith. When people say, well, what do Unitarian Universalists believe? It's a category mistake. We're more process than we are belief. But what we are is a community that holds itself together with certain values. And we're going to begin a long process of learning how to be in relationship with one another. And those who might walk through our doors, and believe me, more and more people are walking through our doors or are with us online all the time. It'll be an opportunity for us to be in right relationship with one another. So that's coming. This is a multi-year effort. And I want to invite you enthusiastically to be part of it, even though some of this work is going to be uncomfortable. What you don't want to do, friends, is shut down or be sad that you got something wrong. I make mistakes all the time. And fortunately, people are gracious enough to tell me where I made the mistake, and I try to correct it. It's up to the people who have the privilege to be sure we're creating a culture that includes others. I heard a wonderful story over the weekend about Ella Fitzgerald and Marilyn Monroe. Ella Fitzgerald was just getting started. African-American singer, one of my favorites, but she couldn't get a club. She couldn't get a club in Los Angeles. What she wanted to do was play the Mocambo Club in LA, where Frank Sinatra had started in 1943. They just weren't interested. But she had this really close friend who was Marilyn Monroe, who loved Ella Fitzgerald. So Marilyn gets on the phone to the club manager and says, listen, you book Ella, and I'll come and sit at the front table every single one of her performances. And he said, okay. Maybe the wrong reason, but he said okay. And the press ate it up because there was Marilyn Monroe on the front table, and Ella Fitzgerald, of course, was belting it out with that beautiful voice of hers and launched a star. We can do this. We have the power to do this. We have the power to speak up in meetings where we see someone being slighted or not being offered that opportunity to be included, and we can say something about it. It took me years to learn to be a little more inclusive as a minister and as a leader, and I'm still not there. My authority gives me the power to do good in the world. And that, I think, is our mission as Unitarian Universalists, to learn and use the power for good. Can you hear me? This is why our efforts at working to alleviate housing insecurity is so absolutely vital. Having a home is fundamental to living a deeper life. The other tragedy of homelessness in this wealthiest country on the planet staggers my mind. It does, really. I'm so proud that we work with Family Promise, what was originally known as Interfaith Housing Network, because they provide a bridge towards finding housing and providing dignity and respect to those who find themselves unhoused. So I want to take a moment to recognize some of the leaders of Family Promise previously. I know that Marcia did a great job saying a lot about Bob, who is still here and is still going to work with Amy. Yeah. But I also, if you're here, would you just stand up? Just take a second. Amy, why don't you stand up? Sally Fritzen, I know I saw you there. Donna Montaro, if you're here, thank you. Joe Lipton's here. Amy Deal Greenland. Sarah Kokos is probably not here. Is she here? If she's here, she represents our youth. And then I'd like any of you who have helped with Family Promise to also please stand in any capacity over the years. I want to see this. Yeah, that's what I thought. This is the work. This is the work. It's not glamorous. It's really not. Making beds, serving meals. I remember the first time I came here and I was starting to help someone set up for the meal, and I thought there was a pile of paper plates, and I started to put them out, and the person who was working with me said, no. We put out the nice plates. As nice as they can be in a church, right? Although our plates are pretty nice. Yeah, nice place. But it's doing this day in and day out that really makes the world a better place. That's the heart of our country. This is still the heart of our country, regardless of what's happening in our government. And I know from personal experience that many even here are only a few paychecks away from being without housing. Don't assume that everyone in this room is set. And as I hope we will become more involved, I want us also to be reaching out to the undocumented immigrants who faces an especially difficult time right now. I'm going to close with a poem by Alison Lutterman entitled, "Praise the Broken Promise of America." Praise deep mineral veins under rich dirt, and fossilized remains of dinosaurs turning themselves into gas for our benefit. Praise the exhausted earth, miles and miles of subsidized corn and cattle, lowing from their hellholes and automated milk barns. Praise farm workers rising before dawn, their sore backs and aching knees, and praise the myths that drew them here, stories eagerly consumed with, and they had nothing but faith. Praise the courage to the reverend to look the dragon in the eye and preach mercy. Praise whatever hidden waterways are still pristine. Praise music that refused to play at the funeral of democracy and the killing cold that swept through Washington when the fake pope took power. Praise drag queens and lipstick lesbians, boys who are girls and girls who are lions, butch women wearing tool belts, and all the musical theater nerds who even now are building new passageways, mapping the next underground railroad, and suiting up to be conductors. Oh, everybody get on board. For this train will chug quietly across the Great Plains and the Rocky Sierras into the desert where people still leave bottles of water and packets of food for the desperate who have always been the lifeblood of this nation. It will stop in obscure hamlets to pick up fugitives with tears tattooed on their cheeks and fraying backpacks overspilling with contraband books. Praise the weirdos, because if anyone can save us, it will be us. And praise all the glittering illusions we gawked at, ignoring our own neighbors in favor of a 24-hour peep show shown on the internet. Praise the convict firefighters on the front lines in Los Angeles, battling the insurmountable for $10 a day. We gambled our future for a hot air balloon with a hole in it. Praise our reckless hubris and the infinite distractions of the hall of mirrors we find ourselves in now. And bless our overwhelmed brains skewering like mice for shelter. Bless our collective rage and protect the officers who stood up on January 6th and now see their attackers roaming the streets like rabid dogs. Bless the animals we've always been, in our coats and shoes and clumsy luggage. Bless our willful ignorance, so enormous, so world-altering that, like the Great Wall of China, it can be seen from outer space, where the gods are shaking their heads even now, in pity and in awe. The authority of inclusion will guide our future, my friends. The table is never completely full of people. There is always room. And the door is never fully closed. Every moment of every day, we have the opportunity to step into the space of greater consciousness, greater love, greater connection with what we consider most holy. Every moment, we have the opportunity to let go and get free. And I invite all of you to come to the table that we are setting by being a community together in whatever way you can. Because someday, friends, we will sit at the welcome table together and we will eat and never be hungry again. Amen.